Hey, welcome to the No Guts, No Gain podcast. This podcast is dedicated to help you navigate the journey of buying a Sandler franchise. So whether you've just started the investigation or you're knee deep into the decision process, we've got you covered. Hi, I'm Dave Mattson, Executive Chairman and President of Franchising here at Sandler. In each episode, I'm interviewing a Sandler franchisee who is in your shoes. Now, maybe they were investigating 2 years ago or 2 months ago, but they're gonna share their experiences, their insights, the questions that they had when they were sitting in your chair. The goal of the podcast is to provide you valuable information and firsthand accounts from their perspective that will help you in your decision-making process for you and your family. So sit back, relax, and get ready to hear from those who have already jumped into entrepreneurship with a Sandler franchise. Hey everybody, welcome to the No Guts, No Gain podcast. And we're in for a special treat today. We're joined with Paul Lanigan. Now, Paul Lanigan is a Sandler trainer consultant out of Ireland and has been with us for quite some time. And the reason I asked Paul to join us today is a couple different reasons. One, first of all, I'm a huge fan of Paul personally, but really Paul's got an awesome journey and took a path. I think Paul, were you a Sandler client first?
No, never
So,
was.
No. Okay. So we'd like to hear the journey. Tell me a little bit about, hey, I ended up gravitating towards this type of business, which was great. You also had the opportunity to have your son come into the business, Rian. So he was in the business for quite some time. And so what did that dynamic look like? How did that look like? And then COVID happened. Everything kind of changed, right? So what happened then? And then you actually left the business for a little while, right? You said, hey, I'm going to do other stuff. And I can. Sandler's afforded me to do other things. I'm doing other things now, which, fantastic. Good for you. But now you're back. And so I think people, it's just an interesting journey. You've got so many different chapters of your life. And I just would love to just spend 20 minutes or so just kind of walking people through those. I think it would be great. So first of all, thank you and welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So tell us a little bit about how long you've been in the business, and tell me a little bit about what the business looked like, maybe as you started and kind of as you progressed throughout your journey with us.
It's 22 years now, believe it or not. And it was somewhat by accident to some extent that I had this reason for deciding that I wanted to go out on my own and do something and not just be part of the corporate first. Although that said, at the time I was working for a startup around that. I had that corporate background, but had then moved into the startup business back in, when did the 2000, and that was for me discovering that the tide, when the tide is out, the rocks are exposed, and that when you're in a large corporate with a brand, that you can get away with a lot of things.
Yeah. Right.
And you can hide there.
Yeah.
And so I joined this startup, and it was a business development sales role. So I was literally their first full-time sales role. Good. And it was because of startup, no brand, no structure, no processes. I was a bad hire. They shouldn't have hired me. And I discovered very quickly that I was floundering. So I was doing the calls, I was getting in front of people, but nothing was moving. And there was some sense of, well, it's a startup. We haven't sold anything, so don't beat yourself up. But at the same point, that you can only get away with that for so long. And I managed to get 2 years out of that, believe it or not. But it was towards the end of it, I was looking around at the idea of starting my own business. And in retrospect, I think I was running away from something, right? I think there was that experience.
Yeah.
I wasn't happy with, and there was a sense of, well, the answer at least seemed to me, well, go do your own thing and then everybody will leave you alone.
Yeah. Or you're doing your own thing anyways in a startup, really, right?
Kind of, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I had been used to in the previous role of having a lot of autonomy, and then moved into the startup, and you're micromanaged in that particular company. So there was a sense of that. And so that's what I mean. Sometimes I was looking probably for the wrong reasons. And my wife was pushing me down the franchise route. She had this idea that I would buy
Genius.
a sandwich franchise or something like that. And I go, how long do you know me? Sandwiches, not. And I'd come across Sandler. I'd never heard of Sandler before. It was just literally on his franchise website, and it said it was sales. And I thought, okay, well, I've been doing that, not very well, but I've been doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And training, I'd done a little bit of that in a previous role internally in large corporate, and I enjoyed that. So I thought, yeah, I can do that. And that's when I reached out to Sandra and had that initial conversation. And so very quickly, then I decided, yeah, I'm going to do this. And so uh, that was late 2001. And then I had my first client meeting. It was January 2002.
Okay.
And yeah, so that was the start. So I bought Sandler. I literally had my deposit paid. I was on the way to the stage for initial training. I had still not been inside a Sandler class. In fact, at the time, Margaret had sent me over tapes, so I could listen to them on the plane on the way over. And I was literally on that journey. I was from New York down to Baltimore on the train the morning of. It was December, frosty, trees covered in ice.
Cold, yeah.
And it was my first time listening to David Sandler in a role play.
And you had bought at this point. We just sent you.
I had bought it this time.
Yeah.
And I went, oh,
you're listening to it. By the way, tapes for everyone that's listening is pre-CD. And now you stream, but that was our version, my version of streaming was called tapes. Just so we can put that into perspective for our younger listeners.
Yeah, 6 tapes in a pack. Yeah. And but I remember listening to this, and it's Sandler talking about this. He was demonstrating negative reverse selling in some role play. It was on the Best of Sandler Live, and he talked about this. It was like a fight between a drunk and a black belt. And a barroom brawl was the term he used. Mm-hmm. I remember listening to this go, oh my Lord, why didn't I have this years ago? Ironically, I probably would have been on a different path maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, we wouldn't have met, right?
We don't know.
Yeah.
But it was that moment I thought, yeah, this is different. I now know. I justified it to myself initially by saying, okay, well, look, these guys have the content, they have the manuals and CDs. That would take me but when you don't know, you don't know. I would have thought, yeah, I can sit down, get some books from the library, build myself some curriculum, and or I can go save myself 6 months and do it this way. That was my rationalization.
Yeah,
I hadn't a clue. I had not a clue. And
so you decided on the train ride that was a good decision.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Then you
after writing the check. Yeah.
And then you came to initial training. So tell us a little bit about what your business makeup was.
I didn't have a clue. I remember coming back from initial training, and I put in a call to it was one of the coaches. I'm unfair to name. And I said, I have this presentation next week. It was actually my first presentation after coming back from training was with a group of people from a venture capitalist. Okay. Happened to know somebody, and I said, listen, I need to come in front of you guys.
Yeah. And why do a low risk presentation the first time? Yeah, let's just do that.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. But I said to him, what am I going to say? And he said, have you got a pen and paper? And he started building out this model, as you and I know, as Wim Junction. Mm-hmm. And I thought, this is genius. That's going to work. And it was over that Christmas, I learned that I got it transcribed. In those days, again, there's no AI. I had somebody to write it out so I could learn it off by heart. And I stood in the kitchen of a friend's house. It was my first time to deliver it before I went to these guys. And that was my model. I didn't have one. Right. But I thought what I'll do is I came from the technology sector. I'd do that. And I thought, startups would be the right market because, well, they're startups and they need stuff. I had just just been in a startup, and I felt, yeah, I had that story. And I think that's one of the reasons why I went to VC, because they had access to their investees.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that for a while, as in I targeted those companies. But at the same time, I was looking at some of the larger companies, and IBM was one. Actually, there was two. There was CA, which had 6 salespeople in Ireland. So people think, these are large companies. They are globally, but locally, it wasn't a large crew. And was a guy who was a technical author. His wife was a sales manager in there, so I got her cell phone number. That was one. And then in IBM, I got the number of the sales director, again, from my sister-in-law, who happened to work in there as an low down the chain, but happened to have access to the directory. And there were some couple of early calls I made in addition to the startups that I was trying to target with those companies as well. And partly because nobody said you shouldn't,
Right.
what are you doing? And so there was an element of just try anything, which I'm not suggesting this is the right way to do this. This is just somebody who didn't have any structure or any plan and said, I could sell it to everybody. And so, yeah, the smaller companies, I got some work there, but it actually started, it kicked off indirectly a journey with corporates, which lasted quite a
So
while.
you went into the model. We have two different models, as people looking at the business know, which is one, they come to you, we'll call that the public model, where you've got people from different industries going. And then the second one is you go to them, and that's more of a private model where you're really tailoring, customizing Sandler to their world, and it's just them. That's the route you took.
Well, I was taking both. So I did have the public presence club
Okay, you did
because
both.
that's where I was trying to cut my teeth as well on the training side.
Yep.
So I was trying to cut my teeth on a number of different things, learning to sell for the first time, running a business for the first time, really training for the first time. And so I did have the public model because I remember you saying that training, just get people in a room together and just start training and just start speaking at events and so on. So I was doing all of that. I just at the same time happened to see that I could do that public content model, the kind of the weekly reinforcement model. That's what I did in IBM. So I got a 6-month project where I was going in twice a week for 2 hours on a Tuesday and a Friday into this group for over a 6-month period. But it was like an internal president's club, as we called it at the time.
Yeah.
So it wasn't that far. It just wasn't public. It was internal, essentially.
Got it.
Yeah.
So you're nesting now. Talk a little bit about your client base have you primarily nested in a particular industry, or if you're finding your clients as you've taken this 22-year journey, a little of everything? What does it look like if you look back?
So if I look back, so it started initially, so I had public, and I went up from a prospecting point of view. Primarily, I was going after the SME market, which is the backbone. But at the same time, if I could get a connection with one of the larger companies, I would do that too, because I was going for both essentially. And yeah, so it was probably a year before I got my first corporate client. But again, as I said, that was like an internal public class. That's all I was doing at the time.
Were you gravitating towards tech because that's where you came from?
Tech, yeah. So again, primarily tech, but for the public, no. You see, this is the interesting thing. But for the public stuff, it wasn't tech; it was SME. So I didn't care what vertical or industry they were in, and I even from that, I got some smaller corporate business. Like here's one, L'Oreal. I did work with L'Oreal because hey, I'm working. I did that for a while. But I didn't purposely go after that industry. Just sales manager, attended some talk I gave, and I reached out afterwards and started that conversation. So
they said
I
yes.
was literally, if it had a pulse and had a sales title on it, I was going after it.
Yeah.
Again, not necessarily saying that's the right thing to do, but again, get the Irish market as well, the way it is, that the makeup of it is. It's a little bit probably different to what you're used to in the States, so that SMEs its owner is selling often, maybe one or two salespeople. Even the larger organizations might have a small sales team, field sales team at the time. But what was evolving, and it was in its infancy at the time, was the inside sales model. And Ireland became a hub for that
It
in
did.
EMEA because there's connections with the US and it's an English
Yep.
speaking. And that was maybe kind of the mid noughties where those teams started to grow and grow and grow. And Ireland strategically invested in those type of organizations. So now you had the IBM field sales team, maybe 20 salespeople in it, but then they also then had this inside sales team with 600 people in it.
Right.
And so that then became of
That became
interest when I
your
managed
focus
to get
spot.
in there. Yeah, yeah.
So over 22 years, because I want to talk to you a little bit about bringing in your son in a second, but any big morphs or pivots that you've seen Sandler go through since that period of time? And it may be, hey, our industries have changed. It could be the way we train has changed dramatically. The way we use technology. It could be a bunch of anything. I mean, it could be a
Mm.
bunch of whatever. But what comes to mind is some of the big, as you look back, wow, we've really kind of morphed or changed or developed in this particular area. Anything come to mind, the big one that you've seen? Because you've been here a long time now.
Yeah, the big one for me is the brand and how it's perceived, particularly in the larger organizations, where traditionally it was really, really strong. When I started first, it was the backbone was the SME
Hmm.
market, and there was some corporate work, but it was very little. And I'm not even just talking globally. And so it was Sandler in many respects was the best kept secret on the planet from a sales perspective. So you'd have one or two people in larger corporates who would have heard of it or had gone through it somewhere, but and sometimes they would hold on to that and keep it quiet because it was
I
their
know.
best kept secret as well. That was their secret sauce of their
Yeah, to
success.
get promoted or make more money.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so but it was, and then you could see this maybe 10 years ago. There was that big pivot and an investment in professional, productization, in technology. And so it then, yeah, that secret sauce in terms of wrapping a brand around that, to me, it made the job when you were a seller going into larger organizations a whole lot easier, because then they said, oh yeah, we've heard of that, we know that. And that became then a comfort blanket for buyers in larger organizations who are risk adverse.
Yeah.
And or a fascinating one for me was, I remember talking to a senior director in a very large Fortune 10 technology company, and he was in the European context. He was saying, Paul, he said, I've got lots of smaller training companies dotted throughout EMEA who are really, really good individual at an individual level. They've got a lot of experience, great skill set. But he
Mm.
said, I would rather, he said, a company any day that could scale, and that I can take a piece of content that solves a problem for me, and I know I can go across EMEA, and that it's the same language,
Yeah.
same concepts, and I need to be able to do that at scale. And he says, that's what
Mhm.
Sandler gives me. And I think that was missing when I talked about the pivot. He wouldn't have seen that prior to that time. And that
Interesting.
to me is the big one, is that Sandler has
Name
kind of taken the
recognition,
secret
brand
sauce and then just
consistency.
exactly come
Yeah.
on. And yeah,
So you brought,
yeah,
I don't know if you brought in, but certainly your son was part of the business for a while, which
yeah,
has to be awesome, right? Uh, I'm sure it's frustrating at the same time because they want them to be mini yous or whatever the case may be. But in essence, that's great. Can you tell us a little bit about how that happened, what Rian did? Would kind of be helpful because I'm sure others are listening or watching saying, "What
yeah,
I'd like some of my
yeah.
kids to get into this business one day."
It wasn't a plan. At the back of my mind, I often wondered what would it
Hmm.
be like. So maybe that was there, but then an opportunity presented itself because Rian had gone to Australia for a year, just part of his own thing he wanted to do, and he came back.
Little walkabout.
And exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah, real crocodile Dundee stuff.
Yeah.
And he just went in a circle and managed to find his way back 10 months later. And he was just doing some casual work in a bar over that Christmas, and I had said to him, "Listen, I could do with some help." He had done marketing degree in college before he left
Mhm.
to go to Australia, and I said, "I could do with some help." I had in mind a few months just to help me get some stuff off the ground, and an extra pair of hands is what I was looking
Yeah,
for.
right.
And then
Yeah.
he came in, he started looking at it, he said, well, hey, you thought about doing this way? And you don't. I said, what do you mean? And he showed me some things he was doing on in terms of online marketing just to get some reach and get some traction. And I thought, oh, never thought. Yeah. And he was really, really good. And I remember he came to November conference one time.
Yep.
He met some of the
The
other
Sandler
franchises,
conference.
and he was sharing that same thing that he was doing with them. And they said, "Oh, that's really cool. Could we?" Right. So that's where it started. And then what happened was, well, COVID hit, and
Yeah.
he we kind of decided that we'd kind of this is only going to be for another 6 weeks, right? We just spend those 6 weeks, we continue it on, and then
Yeah.
he did want to branch out and take that experience, because again, it's really different when it's your own children, because you're looking at them and you're kind of going, this is great working together, and we travel together,
Hmm.
and so there's that bond was developing and or cementing, and but at the same time you want them to grow and have their own independence. And I think
Yeah,
you
it's
see this
tough.
sometimes as people will come in and they'll go outside sometimes to get that experience that I knew. When I looked at my own experience, I thought my own experience in the corporate world, I felt made me able to handle those interactions as a seller with the corporate world, that I didn't feel out of my comfort zone there. And I wanted him to have that too.
Right. Right.
So, but all in all, I think he was with me. But what started out was probably for 3 months, ended up being 3 years.
Yeah. Well, I know you had a
And
heck of an impact on others in the organization, but I think that's true with everything. It just, you hope, you kind of think about it, but either way, it's okay. And they express an interest or something happens. Next, thing you know, they're in the business for a while. And,
yeah,
and regardless if they say 3 months or 3 years, I think the gift that they were given by working with you and learning Sandler at the same time will pay dividends for the rest of his career. I mean, that's just in my head. I just
yeah.
believe.
And that's exactly what's happened.
Yeah,
And look at the role that he went into in this the company he's working with right now. And he's now taken on this sales role, and he's killing it.
killing it. Right.
And he's calling up, I'm going to details necessarily what he's doing, but like the CEO of the company's looking at him and go, where did you learn to do that? Where did you get that from? And I said, oh, Sandler. And
Yeah.
of course, he's not telling me, hey, my
Oh,
dad told me
yeah.
this
Yeah.
or we
Yeah.
did that. No, no, no. But that's okay. It's Sandler's a gift. You give it to people, right?
There you go.
And he's certainly he's taken that and run. And someday he'll come back,
Yep.
right? I
Yep.
know
I
that
believe
he
it.
needs to get that experience to round him and then come back
Yep.
and share it
I
with everybody
100%.
else.
I believe it. So you have this other thing that is very unique, which I'd like you to just spend a couple seconds on. After Rian left, right?
Mhm.
You decided to go for a while,
Yeah.
and maybe kind of let people know what that was. Not what you're doing, but like what happened? Like, why would you thinking, okay, it's time after all this time? So after probably 20 years, I guess it's time. And then something happened, and you're back, which thank goodness for
Yeah.
us. I mean, because you're a great asset to the brand. But what if, to the best of your ability and what you're willing to
Yeah,
share,
sure.
like what happened? And because I think people find it interesting that you came back, right? Just like we
Yeah.
talked about Rian, he had to leave to come back, and he
Yeah.
came back even more, you know, dedicated to the craft almost. So in essence, like it just happened with you in a way too. So walk us through that, if you will.
Yeah. And I think in some crazy way, his journey was priming me in some way, because we'd had COVID for 2 years and we'd worked together quite
And
closely.
Ireland is shut down. Like you can't even go outside
Oh,
of
it
town,
was
right?
crazy. It
Yeah,
was
it's not
crazy. It
like
was the
the US.
longest shutdown, if not on the planet, then certainly in Europe, in terms of
Yeah.
schools being
It's
shut
the
and all that
worst
kind of thing.
shutdown everywhere,
It
anywhere,
was
I thought.
crazy.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Like you
Anyhow,
couldn't leave the town. Like there are like cops at the town borders. You can't go
oh
anywhere.
yeah, oh
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely
Yeah.
crazy. But so we went through that, and then we'd worked quite closely together in the office, and then when he went, I continued, but there was just something missing. And I think, in hindsight, I think that was a big part of it because we'd spent so much time together. And then he went, and I was
Yeah.
literally on my own at that stage.
Yeah.
And COVID had changed everything in terms of how training was done. So this was just post COVID, so everything was still online. People had still not gone back to classroom format, which has changed, thankfully. Um, and so, yeah, I just felt some days you wake up and you feel, you know what, I just feel it. And I was coming up to my 20-year anniversary. And I thought, you know what, maybe I need to do something else. I needed something to kickstart me again.
Yeah. You're going
And
through loss.
it,
You're going through grief.
there is that. And the other side of it, people don't think about, when I started in Sandler, I was also on my own, but the difference was I had a mortgage. I had a wife was working at home. I had 3 kids need to be fed. Whereas 20 years later, thanks to Sandler, I didn't have any financial difficulties.
Right.
So that motive was taken away completely. And now I'm kind of sitting there missing this that I had. And then your mind begins to wonder because you're looking for, why is this? Why do I feel this way?
Yeah. I know.
And I thought, you know what? Sometimes, this old, a change is as good as a rest. And I thought, you know what? I'll just change everything. And hopefully that helps. It didn't.
Yeah.
And well, what I'd been doing, because I'd been doing a lot of my own videos, and again, I'd had over 2 years of doing stuff online, so I
Hmm.
was quite comfortable presenting on camera. I was quite good with cameras myself because it was a hobby of mine.
Yeah.
And so I thought, you know what? I've been doing this myself for a couple of years now. I was even doing a pre-pandemic, make my own marketing videos. And I thought, maybe I can help people do this and it'll be a nice little business, lifestyle business. And yeah, and at that level, it made sense. But I just, again, I didn't really probably think it through because you only realize when you do it then that, oh no, this is not good. Not when I get a job to go out and shoot a video and I have to travel 7 times up and down 3 flights of stairs to pack the car, go out, find a parking space close enough to where I'm going, and then set everything up and go back again and reverse it. And I'm looking at the money going, this is a fraction of what I would have earned. And again, this wasn't about the money, but
But
so
that's how you
if
kept
I'd
score.
really been enjoying it and getting fulfillment
Yeah.
out of it, the money wouldn't have mattered so much.
Yeah. Right.
But it was,
When
I,
you're
I
not
wasn't
enjoying
enjoying
yourself,
it.
that's how you're keeping score. When you're not enjoying yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I
So that
did
was it.
that
You're like, hey,
for
I
a
want to
while.
come back.
I said, you know what, this is crazy. And I was online. I still on LinkedIn. My profile was there. All the people I interacted with are all clients and people I'd worked with over the years. And so I'd never made that break away from it fully. And I had people contact me and said, hey, listen, can you come help us with this? And I'm looking, they're asking me to help them go ahead, fix a sales problem like I'd been doing for 20 years. And then on the other hand, somebody says, hey, I'd like to get a testimonial video recorded. And
Yeah.
again, no disrespect to people who do that. I now realize how difficult that is
Yeah.
and how detail oriented and structured you have to be to do that successfully.
Yeah.
And so I think it helped me as well. There's no question about it. And also, when you take something away, and
No, you want it
I
even more.
realized how much I missed it. That
Yeah.
was the big thing. I'd been asked to do a couple of things, and I did one. I remember it was a sales kickoff, and it was just a talk on storytelling. And there's 200 people in the audience, and I went, I enjoyed that. I need to
You're
I
home.
need to just
You're home again.
exactly recognize for what it is,
Yeah. You're home
and
again.
that's started that then, and that was the fastest decision I ever made in my life.
Well, it's an awesome story. I appreciate you sharing. I have to ask you, and I know I told you we keep it to. I know you're traveling, but if you had to give one piece of advice to somebody that is looking as you were 22 years ago and a year ago, I guess, a year and a half ago, as you came back, any words of wisdom for you to, I mean, for you to share with somebody that's behind you in their curve of investigating Sandler?
I don't know if it's wisdom. I would certainly say just do it. It's don't overthink it.
Don't
I,
overthink.
I think it's kind of funny because I remember when I joined and I went to Baltimore for my initial training. Margaret came to me and Margaret worked at Sandler, and she shared with me that there was another company. Ironically, it was a venture capital company I went to speak at. That they had looked for a license and had just spent too long thinking about it, and just then I came in and did it, and that was the end of that. And I've seen that with other people as well when
Yeah.
they're thinking of making that leap, and it is transformational in your life. You know, when you go out and work on your own, and from a corporate background, that's a different. In some respects, it's the same. Like you're still selling, you're still helping people solve problems. You're just taking away a lot of the support.
No
so you're kicking it.
There's no parachute. That's really what it boils down to, I think.
Yeah.
You know, and I think look, if you're talking about just do it, I think people struggle in a couple fronts, which I think your advice is right on. Do I stay where I am and just suck it up for another 10 years, right? And be miserable?
Yeah.
Use the Sandler line. You know, I died at 45, but I actually got buried at 80. It just kind of walked through life. Do you do that? Do you do something on your own? Like, hey, I'm just right. You said I'm going to take 6 months to a year, write content. Do I do that? Do I do something that doesn't rely on me? That's the other big one. Like, should I go to a B2C? Should I go open a yogurt shop? I just got to pick the right corner. That's it.
And there's a couple of things. So I think there's something that everybody faces, which I'll get to in a moment.
Yeah.
But it was something I'd heard David Sandler say later on that kind of spoke to me, which was this idea of what's the worst thing that could happen, being a worst case scenario player. And I thought, worst case scenario is that it doesn't work out for me. I spend 3-6 months doing this, but you know what? Just doing that, I'm going to learn a ton. I'm going to learn so much. That's the worst thing. As in, you know, I can survive 6 months, and that's how long it's going to take me a couple of months to get it. If all else fails, crazy thinking. So that's one side of the decision. Second side of the decision is people worry about, well, I've got these obligations. I've got a mortgage to pay. That's exactly why you should do it. That's exactly why, because that'll make you succeed. If you don't have that, if you got you got 10 million in your own money in the bank, it's going to be much tougher for you because you
don't work until
you have to get outside your comfort zone.
Gone. Yeah.
You have to
witnessed
do
it for 38 years.
Yeah. So ironically, what holds people back is actually their greatest enabler, which is that fire under their backside. That means they have to succeed. There's no other option.
100%. I appreciate you being in the network. Appreciate you as a person and everything that you've done for us. And thanks for joining us today and sharing your journey with all those that are trying to figure out what to do with their last career stop. And whether it's Sandler or not, you know, we wish them nothing but the best. And I think, you know, your talk today helped them one way or the other. And so thank you. Thanks for joining us today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Right. Listen, everybody, this is No Guts, No Game podcast. You can check us out. You've got plenty of other Sandler people that we've had an interview with in the past. Just take a look, keep looking. You'll find hundreds of people just like Paul Lanigan. Hopefully we have the opportunity to meet face to face, but until then, good selling. For more information on Sandler franchising opportunities, go to sandler.com/franchising. And don't forget to subscribe to the No Guts, No Game podcast on your favorite app.